Welcome to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by my man, Audley Stevenson, the Odd Man. He'll unpack wisdom and insights from a cross-section of top quality performers in business, media, sports, entertainment, and lifestyle to uncover key elements to help you live your best audacious life ever. So without further ado, here is the Odd Man.
Welcome to another edition of the Audacious Living Podcast. I'm Audley Stevenson, and it's a pleasure as always to be here with you as we continue our goal to help our listeners and viewers live their best audacious life ever. Our social media channels are just one of the great ways that you can connect with us. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and I encourage you to like, follow, and share. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel and get the instant notifications every time new content comes out. The focus of today's episode will be on a very important journey that we all going to take at some point or another. It's very personal and it's very unique to us, and that's the journey of self-realization. It's important to understand that it's not the same for everyone because it is so uniquely different. We are own each individually so uniquely different, and that's the beauty of the beautiful part about life and what makes a journey so magical. To help us dissect a bit of this, my good friend Chris Cirak joins me on the podcast this week, and again we'll explore that very, very personal journey, and Chris will take us through all sorts of wonderful thoughts and insights that he developed in his book, which I got my copy right here, Be You, the journey of self-realization. Again, it's an important pathway that we all take, and I'm absolutely certain that our listeners are going to enjoy this conversation. It's a great one. Chris leaves us with some good insights, so I encourage you to grab your pen, get ready to take some feverish notes, because there's tons and tons of great learnings in this one. So without any further ado, here's my man, Chris Cirak. Enjoy. Chris, how's it going, man? Nice to have you on the podcast today.
It's fantastic, Audley. Thank you for having me. First of all, it's rare that the live person compared to the picture behind them is even brighter and even more shiny.
Yeah,
so I love that. I'm talking to double of you. And
he's my bodyguard there. You always have someone to have your back, so why not have your own back, right?
Exactly. Very good.
I appreciate that. We were talking before we pressed record about your book, Be You, and I had to admit that I hadn't been able to finish the whole thing because of how deliberate. And the way it was written in terms of just very deliberate, not to take methodical and read it and go back to it because it's so thought-provoking in so many ways. So I certainly want to commend you on a really, really good job. At least what I've read has been fantastic. So
thank you. Well, you know what? It's your own fantasticness that is being reflected back to you. So everyone gets out of whatever we do, everything in life. We see who we are and how we respond to things, and so if somebody just wants a daily positive reminder or something, they can dip in and out of the pages and get that out of it. Or if they want a deeper sit and a deeper experience and really sit on it and reflect, and they'll get that.
You commented, and I love that point that you made around the language that was used in writing the book. It's not convoluted or complex, or you have to sometimes you read something, what's that word mean? You got to even look it up to figure it out. But the manner was written in a very simple way, and I don't mean that in a negative sense at all, but very simple to digest and understand. And I think that was part of the sort of the beauty of that process of reading your book, because it absorbed much easier.
Yeah, definitely. And that was really, in my journey, I was coming across information that I felt like there was a barrier there to the wisdom that, everyone's talking about the same thing essentially, but coming at it from different perspective, different wrappers, and wherever you are in life, certain things resonate and some things don't. And to me, it was like, years later, I would come back to a book that I just didn't comprehend at all. And then suddenly I got it. And I kept wondering, well, if the language had just been a little simpler, I might have gotten it sooner.
Right.
So that was really the intent. One of the two big intents was not to have the vocabulary be a turn off, and
Yes.
very often that is because we walk into things with preconceived notions of
Sure,
different
absolutely.
words and such, and especially when it comes to self-growth and realization, and there's a lot of stuff in there that might turn people off, that it doesn't have to, because the wisdom is pure, it's clean, it's for
Yes.
everyone. It's not so. And then the other thing really was the discoverability. So I love that you're reading front to back. A lot of people don't. I've been teaching for almost 10 years, and a lot of people don't learn that way. They like to just dip in, dip out, jump to a particular chapter, more of like a glossary approach of like, what am I dealing with right now? And then they can go to that chapter, because that's also part of the design, is you don't have to commit to the whole thing.
See, I'm the kind of guy that I don't read spoilers, right? Don't mess it up. I want to start and go all the way through. So I'm not.
Yes. That's awesome. That's awesome. Taking it all in.
That's it. A couple points I want to raise that you talked about in the book, and I wanted to expound a little bit on that. One, we sort of talked about our life being a blueprint. And so we all have this sort of direction of where we're supposed to go based on this blueprint. And let me know if I'm overcomplicating it or at all, because as I got in my own head, I'm going, well, what does that mean? But at the same time, our life is made up, and I believe, our life is made up of a sort of a collection of experiences that kind of gets us to this point. Yeah. So depending on the experiences, you may not grow in a certain way or learn things in a certain instance, but it's still part of our blueprint, right? So the blueprint says we're supposed to go through those experiences to get the growth. Is that what the suggestion is?
Well, yes,
again, if I'm making it complicated than it needs to, I want to apologize, but that was sort of what was going on in my head, and that's why it's taking me so long to read it, because I'm having all these inner thoughts, right?
Yes, well, that's fantastic. So there's essentially, an inner knowing that as we encounter all these situations in life. So the first thing is really important to, as you point out, to really embrace the idea that there are no really bad or good experiences, and that we need to pursue the good ones and shut out the bad ones. As we all know, we grow most from kind of the negative experiences, but good and bad are labels, and we start to get down on ourselves or start to doubt ourselves. But all of those things are really, they point to reactivity within ourselves. We react to things that we judge to be good, and then we react to things that we judge to be bad, and then we try to steer and control life accordingly. Right. But we're conditioned to believe that it's the environment, the world around us, that is to blame, that we need to figure it out and plan and control it in order to get rid of the unpleasant stuff and just have more of the good stuff. Right. When really all of those experiences are just pointing back to that blueprint inside, which is what really resonates with us, what is true to our own just being. And everyone kind of has a very unique voice there. That's that inner voice that I talk about. And it's there every single day, every decision we have to make, and just getting dressed in the morning. Sure. And so staying true to that is life is vast and so many experiences. It's continuous. The more, we are in that present beingness of ourselves, and then there is no really, this outcome orientedness that we get led to live for the future. And then we're never really present. But that also keeps the concept of time alive in us, and past and present. I mean, regrets of the past, and then hopes for the future and all that stuff. But once that stuff shrinks and we're not so attached to these outcomes, or think about the past, and then we start to feel more continuous anyway. Right. So then we realize that blueprint is infinite. And we are infinite beings, right? If we want to go there. So it's just experience, as opposed to sitting on the couch and thinking about life. You have to experience things, and then the challenge becomes: do we follow the outside voices of what we're supposed to do and what others have told us, or if we open that channel to our body awareness, because that blueprint lives inside of us. That's us, our being, our presence, and the outside voices are in the head.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, you sort of talked about experiences, and sort of what, in my mind, sure, there's good. there's good experiences, absolutely, right? We have moments that are just great. We feel good. We're happy about them. And there's other things that happen to us that aren't as good. While some will label them bad experiences, I kind of think those are perceived bad experiences, because I really think that if we sort of hold on to them and embrace them, there's something that comes out of that. And one of the things I talk about is that, so on the other side of the rough stuff and the obstacles, that's where all these magical, wonderful greatness lies, right?
Yeah. So that's really the essence of the book. So you already embody it fully.
I'm there.
So chasing the good things and resisting and trying to steer away from the bad things, that leads to a roller coaster of a life. That's going out every day and just almost living in a state of fear of like, where, how can I avoid the stuff that I don't like, and where can I create more of the stuff that I do like? But then life goes up and down every day. There's no consistency, and we cling to the good stuff and we resist the bad stuff, and it's just like a battle. That's how life feels like, a fight, right? It's certainly an emotional roller coaster. But what those both good and bad experiences have in common is that by hanging on to the good experiences, what we judge to be good, deemed to be good, and resisting the negative experiences, in both cases, we're holding on to feelings. Regardless if they're positive or negative, we're holding on to them. They're getting stuck, essentially. We're creating stuck feelings. And those block us from this flow of life that is meant to go through us. We've, I think, heard the term being a vessel for life, right? Passing through. So once all of those emotions, good and bad, are allowed to pass through us on a continuous basis, then our center is not attached to the things around us, but it's really from within. And then not so pleasant experiences become just as beautiful, essentially, as positive ones, because they're life. It's life happening.
You see, we oftentimes talk on this podcast about, again, you're being your bold, audacious self, and what prevents people from doing that. And you touched on the stuckness, right? Those are the things that hold us back, because we're attaching feelings to them, as you just said.
Yes.
Right. So I wonder if you sort of talk about some of the things that we can do to separate ourselves from the feelings, because once we do that, then, as you just said, right, those perceived bad things just become life.
Yes, they become life. And the bigger flow of things happening, and that's the magic that you were referring to a moment ago. Where you just being alive is just incredible. It's a miracle. It's just unbelievable, and the magnificence of that gets lost when we worry about little things, right? Because that is a bigger picture realization, and to live in that space of being a miracle, everything around us, then the other stuff loses its grip on you. So the things we can do is, primarily the reason these things have grip on us, good and bad, is because we're conditioned to live through what I call the headspace. So we're in our head, and that's where reactivity lies. We react to things, and that's, we judge them as good and bad. And that's also where past and future live, and where fear, there's anxiety, all these things are basically creations of the mind. The mind is a great tool for organizational matters, for analysis and planning, certain practical aspects. But in order to really understand oneself and be in alignment with that blueprint, that the brain doesn't know you. We use it as a tool.
Right. So I want to make a point here. I don't mean to cut you off, but in terms of understanding, so when we talk about the inner voice, that's not our brain.
It's definitely not our brain.
That's a clear distinction, right? I think
exactly. Yeah. The brain is a source of intelligence, but it's not a source of wisdom. That wisdom comes from within. We talk about it as like an intuitive hit. Well, it's only a hit because we're not connected to it most of the time. So little voices, little tidbits come through it occasionally. And then whether we listen to it or not is also, a factor. But everyone has had that experience. Everyone knows like I shouldn't have done that. Or I wasn't being true to myself, and so forth. But to come back to, how to connect to that inner voice is really coming out of the headspace. There's very basic things we do every day, exercise. It could be folding laundry. It could be very menial things that take us out of the activeness and the reactivity, and we kind of settle into this quiet, still place. Obviously, meditation or breathing exercises and things that, just being in stillness, that too takes us out of that reactivity. And there's, in the book, I describe, the technique of really very basic, I call it thought awareness, is becoming aware of our thoughts. The moment we're aware of a thought, it no longer rules us. The only time we're in reactivity to the world around us is when we have a thought and we believe it and we chase it and we follow it, and like that leads to another thought. Before you know, we're lost in thought. 10 minutes, 20 minutes go by before we kind of snap out of it. And how to create some distance, some perspective on thinking, on the thoughts that just pop up all day long. And that helps us stay out of this getting lost in them all the time. And very simple things you can do, just focusing on your breath and noticing when the mind pulls us away, and just noticing. In that moment of noticing, we break the attachment essentially to believing our thoughts.
Right. It seems to me that this needs to be a very deliberate act in terms of being mindful of our thoughts, particularly now when, look, you got your phone in your hand and it can go off 20 different times for 20 different things, and you're just jumping from sort of one thought to the next and trying to keep up with it. But this needs to be deliberate, what you're describing, doesn't it?
Oh, completely. And it's unfortunately in our evolution as a species, we're more like teenagers, where we're like reacting, so we have a ways to go, right? But and that is, even as adults, it's still a challenge, because the world is designed to elicit reaction from us. Like you said, everywhere we look, not just our gadgets, but the news and billboards and media and other people. It's always like, what's your opinion? What's your opinion? What do you stand for? What's right? What's wrong? What do you want? What you don't want? And this just keeps us active in our headspace all day long. And so, yes, it takes a deliberate effort to kind of come out of that. Fortunately, not a lot. What I suggest is 15 minutes of thought awareness practice in the morning and in the evening, and you can already kind of, lessen the roller coaster effect.
Gotcha. There was a line in there, several lines that I actually love, but the one that really jumped out at me is that your plans are interfering with life. And that's so true. Right? Just in terms of, we think we know where we're going, we know what we want to do, and it's not aligned with that blueprint. And there you go.
Exactly. Well, with maturity, that's basically everyone kind of reaches that point of realization. Is like everything I ever planned never really turned out that way. Right. And the struggle and trying to steer things along the way, we were never present. We were always looking to get to that next place, and life goes by quickly, and it's so deep down inside of us that we don't even take a shower without enjoying the shower. The mind is always planning and trying to control. It's always thinking ahead. So it's always, when we're living through that headspace, we're always in the next moment instead of the present one.
Gotcha. So the headspace and the inner voice, I think there's a term head-centric that's used, which is kind of a cool little term, but there's a natural kind of battle between the two, isn't there at times?
Well,
or is battle too harsh of a word?
There's I don't think they stand on equal ground. That's a great question. People say you need some balance between head and heart and all that. When I having delved into it further, and even just writing the book, which took over 2 years, and every single sentence, like you said, there's something behind it that motivated it to a deeper, going deeper within myself, and that never came from the headspace. So every time people said, what motivated to write you the book, and I said, I didn't write the book. The book wrote itself through me, right? And I felt immediately, if it was me trying to write, it was just garbage. I may as well just stop, which I did, and then I have to regroup and reground myself in my body, and so that I'm aware of the thoughts, and that creates enough space for that creativity and that flow and that magic and the miracle and everything to kind of flow through me. And then the thoughts become practical in nature. Now I need to execute and write this stuff down in an organized manner. But so they're more in service to that greater current, than just kind of on equal ground.
Got you.
Yeah.
There's and I'm going to mess it up for sure, but there's a quote by Bruce Lee where he talks about our life kind of being formless like water, right? And that sort of, as I was reading, that kind of came to the forefront a few times. Can you sort of talk about the realness of being formless like water?
Yes, and I love that quote. And I love Bruce Lee, and I've seen that one many times. So again, it comes back to when we live through our headspace, there's a measure of needing to know things. That's what the mind is designed to do. It needs to know things and understand things, interpret, and thus control and predict and project. And so in that space, there's no flow. There's only controlling and clinging and resisting and that whole dynamic. And as well as a lack of trust that if the mind lets go of the very thing that it's designed to do, it freaks out.
Right.
And that's what happens. It's like if we're living in our head and the brain we're telling our brain to stop controlling, well, that need for control is the very thing that the brain does. Right?
That's what it's supposed to do, right?
It's what it's supposed to do, right? So it's not saying the brain is wrong or we're not using we shouldn't never use the mind. It's we use it for the things it's designed for, but not for the greater guidance, the greater knowing, the greater wisdom, the connecting and aligning with the blueprint. That's not what it's for. So it really requires a coming out of the headspace entirely to enjoy, because then you don't need to like wonder about, can I trust life to happen this way? You're not living and experiencing life through that mental lens. You're experiencing it through being and your presence. And there's a much deeper trust that is just in place there. It's being connected to the miracle and yourself and who you are, and just knowing that I'm meant to be me in this particular way. And it just doesn't even matter what anyone else says or does. It's let them believe what they want, and they should be themselves as well. That inner truth does not compete with other people's inner truths. Whereas the mental truth is always arguing, comparing, and like, if I believe this, then the other person should believe it too, because if they don't, I feel threatened. Well, that's mind chatter stuff. But the inner truth, the inner voice doesn't behave that way. So you become like water when you are being present in your body, connected to your authentic self, and you just flow with things because you don't cling or resist to life happening. And it's a really beautiful experience.
It is. Where we're seeing it, when you sort of see what's happening, even the political landscape, and I'm not trying to get political in any way, shape, or form, but when you sort of watch, when these politicians are going back and forth at each other, very much trying to convince the other person what I'm thinking is wrong or why it's not right, and why I'm the one that's in the power and I'm the one that knows what he's talking about. And it's just so fascinating because you can see the headspace is taking over, right? It really is.
It completely is. And there's a chapter in there, or some passages that really address exactly that, and in much softer language. But essentially that it's just a chess game that's happening out there, and they're a mental chess game of now this we're in control, and then the next other side comes back with a counter strategy. It's just back and forth, and this is this mental chess game, and there's really no sense in getting caught up in it, because you get pulled into the headspace, and then you're just arguing like everyone else.
It does, and I think that's when we talk about being the deliberate and the thought awareness that comes in, right? Like, you have to know what's happening in your mind, and I think it takes practice. It's not something that you can just say, I'm gonna do this. It takes some time to figure that out, isn't it, Chris?
It does. On one hand, we've been conditioned and raised to believe this way. From toddler stage, people are telling us who we should be and what we should do, and the media and peers and teachers, everyone putting their experiences of life onto us. And so by the time we come of age, we don't really have a connection to our own voice anymore. That's not being taught anywhere, currently at least. So you go by, decades go by that we're in this mind driven life and career and pursuing outcomes and expecting them to make us happy. And so this just keeps going for a while. now the good news is, despite, you just go halfway through your life that way, to break away from this thought identification happens rather quickly. Even though with no exposure whatsoever, just 15 minutes a day, like I say, they already start to you catch these glimpses of peace, inner peace, and balance, and just not feeling triggered as much as before. It's not a overnight process. You're absolutely right, but it's also the small things here and there that you notice a change of not being so attached and triggered by the world around us. They kind of inform the next, like, oh, I want to do this some more. And it's really, you don't have to wait for the day when there's a tipping point and suddenly you're in tune with yourself. It just happens more and more. Positive momentum builds more and more, and it's the little things. It's not like these big decisions either. I think it just you got to start. Yeah, you got to sit down a couple times, but it doesn't take much to recognize how mad the mind is if we use it for everything.
Yeah, no, I get it. I mean, I've been looking at my mind side eye as of late. like you've been really messing me up, man. Like, it is kind of funny. It is kind of funny.
Yes. Yeah.
I also want to touch on happiness in that process of being happy, because certainly one of the things that was clearly identified is that we oftentimes attach our happiness to outside things, right?
Yeah.
Jobs or careers, relationships, cars, whatever. And those things can come and go, can't they?
Yeah, and that's a great questions, by the way. Every single one of them. I wish we had 10 hours to do this. That's really one of the misconceptions. A lot of people think, well, then I shouldn't pursue, abundance. I shouldn't look for happiness and relationships, and things and achievements. No. We should absolutely. We're in the physical. Life is amazing. Yeah. All those things can make you happy. It's just not permanent happiness. The attachment to, well, now I own this and I have my life set up this way, and an income or a house or a partnership or children, whatever it may be. The assumption that this will now stay in place and make me happy forever, that's where we get into trouble. They absolutely bring joy and happiness. But just like all feelings, one needs to not cling to those, because then you start to control again, and then suddenly the fear comes in of losing it, and then a happy situation sours very quickly. And it's really our clinging to it that creates it. And just enjoy it for as long as it lasts. Sometimes it's very short, sometimes it could be many, many years or a long time. Some things last a lifetime. That's great too, but we just have to allow it to take its natural happy course. And then the true joy, the true happiness, the permanent happiness is in the flow of things coming and going, of life coming and going.
Well, Chris, we're talking about the journey of life, right? That's where you talk about the true joy and happiness, that life, that journey that we go on, because allows, and then the beauty part, when you reflect back and see exactly, when this happened here, that's what changed here, and it's sort of watching, and so it's that's where I see the joy and excitement is for me.
Yes, absolutely. I know the journey is a big theme with all your guests, and that's exactly it. And so there's some deep wisdom in what you're describing, in that you're looking back and you're seeing how your life unfolded, and for you to get to where you are today, and certainly with more time, anyone can really tell, like, how one thing led to the next, to the next, to the next. And we don't really have to, if we try to enact something, it usually didn't turn out that way anyways. And so there's really, that we shouldn't stress out so much about trying to plan our life before living it, is what I say, is like, just live it, and learn to trust yourself that you can respond to circumstances. Again, your inner voice is your GPS, and you'll know in that situation what's right or wrong. You can't control situations or what people do and whatnot, but as they show up, then you act and respond in alignment with yourself, and that informs the next moment more than anything else. All this planning and projecting is it's just not feasible. It's not realistic. There are too many variables in life and elements, and so many of them. It's not a negative statement. It's like there's so much amazingness. There's so many possibilities.
Yep.
The mind can only, think of a handful and then try to create some plan and project that into the future with all these variables. It's why live that way? It's so hard. Allow all those possibilities to exist and bring life to you, and then respond to what shows up.
Got you. The expression "stop and smell the roses" sort of, what comes to mind, and taking that time to be present. I think that's a big part of it, right? Like our mind wants to be planning in the future and doing all these things, as you said, but if we're present in that moment and taking in what we're absorbing in that moment, then I think that's where the beauty comes in.
Yes, and that's really our natural state. I mean, we for some reason have the ability to overthink and overplan our life, but the rest of nature doesn't. It's all plugged into right now and experiencing the smell, the roses, and also the danger if there's a predator around or whatnot. And then but it's the experience of living that is at the forefront, and not trying to control life or make it something that we come up with in our head. So you want to be continuously smelling the roses, or smelling whatever you're smelling, but
whatever's on the pathway.
Exactly.
There may not be roses all the time.
And that's really one of the wonderful things is viewing life as a play. When we go to the movies, usually in these, especially formula movies, that in the first half hour there's the would-be hero hasn't yet recognized, hasn't taken charge of their destiny on yet, and usually something bad happens to them to motivate that. Well, when we're watching this, we don't when we see something bad happen to the protagonist, we don't yell to the projected person, stop, and just it all start drama and crying and all that. No, we know this is a story that's unfolding, and it's going to lead to motivation and insights about oneself, and stepping into your role and recognizing that blueprint. So really viewing life as a play more, that you're able to look back and see how it all unfolded. In the same way, you can look at situations and go, I wonder where this is going to lead to, without getting caught up in like, oh, this means this and that, and then getting lost in the headspace again. So it's so exciting to be alive.
Got you. It certainly is. And I enjoy my life and all that has come with it. And I can tell you, there's been perceived bad things that's taken place as well as the good things. And so I think holding on to those beautiful pieces is the key. Chris, I've really enjoyed this conversation. It's enlightening for me in a lot of ways. I certainly know I'm going to finish reading that book whenever I do, because there's a lot more good stuff in there for me. Yeah. I want to touch on sort of one last point before we wrap up here. And it is along the lines, you sort of touched on a moment ago, stepping into our role, and how significant that is, not only for just ourselves, but for those around us. And so when we talk about being audacious and being bold, as being the person that we're supposed to be, not only for ourselves, but for other people.
Yeah, and that's exactly it. And that's really the way to create a better world and influence those around us, and help others step into their role. It's because we're not pushing a particular agenda. We're not telling people they should be this or that. That's actually where all the trouble starts. It's being yourself. There's an energy to that, a flavor that everyone wants. Everyone wants to be themselves, and by carrying yourself in that light, you empower others to find that light within themselves. And again, your truth does not compete with their truth, and so forth. And when we have a planet of people who recognize themselves as the center of what is true, then they don't need to feel like they need to fight with others. So I know currently in this world, it's a bold and audacious way to live. But we have to be role models, and being yourself is the way to go about.
I'm all for that one, Chris. Really. Yeah. Listen, like I said, I love this. Can you let our listeners and viewers know where they can go and check out your book?
Yeah, certainly. My website, Cirak.com. That's my hub, and you can find find me on all the social platforms at Amazon, Barnes & Noble, Google Play, Kobo. I mean, all the formats are out there. So come find me.
Awesome. Well, look, I would certainly encourage our listeners to do so. Chris, it's been a pleasure. Really appreciate this. Like I said, a lot of fun, great insights, and all the best, my friend.
Oh, thank you so much, Audley. I hope we can do it again. There's so much more to talk about.
Will do. Sounds good. Take care.
Thanks.
Back we are here on the podcast. Big shout out to Chris. Thank you so much for stopping by, and again leaving some incredible insights. I think listeners really walked away with a better understanding of that when we talk about a journey of self-realization. For our listeners, I encourage you to visit Chris's website, ChrisCirak.com. Subscribe to his teachings, his learnings. At the very least, you can pick up a copy of his book, Be You Again, the journey of self-realization. It's an important journey that we all go through. In this world of social media, it's so easy to get caught up in, what you're seeing, and you're just scrolling through your feed, and it's really easy to get caught up in what other people are doing, and it's natural to want to compare yourself. But I would encourage our listeners that, the journey that others are on, that's their journey. Don't get caught up in what people are doing. Focus on your pathway. You will eventually get to the place that you were destined to be. So it's really important to remember to stay on your journey. I want to thank everyone for tuning in to another edition of the Audacious Living podcast. If you haven't registered for email notifications, you can do so by going over to bestaudaciouslife.com. And every time new content comes out, you'll be instantly notified, and you'll get an email notification of new content. That by far is the best way to stay connected. We've reached again another end to another episode. Thanks again to Chris for stopping by. Thanks to our listeners. We would not be here without your constant support and encouragement. So I thank you, and I ask you to continue to keep this audacious living train moving. We got some good stuff coming up. But again, we reached the end of the episode. So until next time, I encourage you to be safe, be kind, show love to one another, and be audacious.
You've been listening to the Audacious Living Podcast, hosted by Audley Stevenson. If you enjoyed what you heard, be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Until next time, be audacious.